The security system alert pinged on my phone at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. Someone had entered my apartment. I was 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., sitting in a classified briefing at the Treasury Department, so I knew with absolute certainty that whoever had triggered my door sensor shouldn't be there. I excused myself from the meeting and pulled up the camera feed on my phone. The image quality was crystal clear. One of the benefits of having security clearance that required regular threat assessments was that I'd been authorized to install government-grade surveillance in my residence. My sister Vanessa stood in my living room, looking around with that familiar expression of casual entitlement she'd worn our entire lives. She walked directly to my home office, barely glancing at anything else. I watched her try the office door. Locked as always. She pulled something from her pocket. It looked like a tension wrench and pick set. Where had she learned to pick locks? It took her 4 minutes. Not bad for an amateur. The door swung open and she disappeared inside. My jaw clenched. I pulled up the office camera feed. Vanessa went straight to the wall safe behind my desk, the one concealed behind the framed map of the Treasury Department's organizational structure. She'd obviously been in my office before when I wasn't home, probably during one of her surprise visits, when she'd used the emergency key I'd given our parents. I watched her examine the safe's electronic keypad. She tried several combinations. Our mother's birthday. Our father's birthday. Her own birthday. All incorrect. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. After a moment she held the phone up to the safe's keypad. Some kind of hacking app probably. I made a mental note to report this to building security and update my systems. 5 minutes later the safe clicked open. Vanessa's face lit up with triumph as she swung the door wide. She reached inside and pulled out the sealed document folders I'd stored there. Her expression shifted to confusion as she examined them. These clearly weren't what she'd expected to find. I knew exactly what she was looking at. 3 folders containing bearer bonds issued by the United States Treasury. Total face value, $500,000. Protected government securities that I'd been authorized to hold as part of my work as a Treasury Department financial analyst specializing in securities fraud investigation. She couldn't possibly understand what she was holding. To an untrained eye, they probably looked like fancy certificates or maybe old stock papers. I watched her stuff the folders into her oversized purse, close the safe and hurry out of my apartment. I sat very still for a long moment, processing what I'd just witnessed. Then I made 3 calls. First to my direct supervisor at Treasury. Then to the Treasury Inspector General's office. Finally to the Secret Service Financial Crimes Task Force. All 3 had the same immediate reaction. Lock down everything, report the theft through official channels, and do not attempt to recover the securities myself. Those are registered instruments, my supervisor said, his voice tight with tension. Serial numbers tracked in the federal database. If anyone tries to cache them or transfer them, the system flags it automatically. But Sarah, your sister just committed a federal crime. Multiple federal crimes. You understand that? I understand. Treasury takes theft of government securities extremely seriously. This isn't something we can look the other way on. I'm not asking you to. I'm reporting a theft of protected federal instruments. Follow standard protocol. There was a pause. The response team will be thorough. And fast. Good. I ended the call and returned to my briefing, though I barely heard a word of the presentation. My mind was replaying the security footage, watching my sister systematically break into my home and steal $500,000 in government securities. Vanessa had always been the golden child. Beautiful, charming, effortlessly social in ways I'd never managed. Our parents adored her. She'd married young to a moderately successful dentist, had 2 picture-perfect children, and lived in a McMansion in the suburbs that our mother loved to brag about to her friends. I, on the other hand, had been the difficult daughter. Too serious, too focused on my career, too uninterested in traditional family milestones. I'd joined the Treasury Department straight out of graduate school with a master's degree in forensic accounting. Spent 8 years working my way up through increasingly classified positions. My current role involved tracking international securities fraud and money laundering schemes. My family had no idea what I actually did. When they asked about my job, I gave vague answers about financial analysis and government work. They assumed I was some kind of low-level bureaucrat pushing papers in a cubicle. They'd certainly never asked why I maintained a high-security clearance or why armed federal agents occasionally showed up to conduct security interviews with my neighbors. I caught the next train back to Philadelphia, arriving at my parents' house at 7 that evening. Vanessa's Range Rover was parked in the driveway, along with our parents' sedan and Uncle Mike's pickup truck. A family dinner, apparently. Perfect. I used my key and walked in to find everyone gathered in the dining room. Vanessa sat at her usual spot, looking radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her husband Derek sat beside her, checking his phone. Our parents were bringing dishes from the kitchen while Uncle Mike poured wine. Sarah. Mom's face registered surprise. I didn't know you were coming for dinner. Surprise visit, I said, keeping my voice light. I had some time off and thought I'd drive up. How wonderful. Set another place, honey, she called to Dad. It's so rare we get both our girls here together. Vanessa looked up from her phone and smiled at me. That perfect, practice smile she'd perfected in high school. Hey big sister. How's the office job treating you? Busy. You know how government work is. I really don't. She laughed and Derek chuckled along with her. All those bureaucratic forms and procedures. I don't know how you stand it. I sat down across from her. It has its moments. How have you been? Wonderful, actually. She exchanged a meaningful glance with Derek. We've been making some exciting financial decisions lately. Investment opportunities. Oh. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of investments? Just some securities Derek's financial advisor recommended. Very sophisticated stuff. Probably too complex to explain. But the returns are supposed to be excellent. My parents returned with the last of the dinner dishes. Dad started carving the roast while Mom settled into her seat with a satisfied sigh. Vanessa was just telling us about her new investments, Mom said proudly. Derek's firm is doing so well. They're really building wealth for the future. College funds for the kids, Vanessa added, reaching for her wine glass. We want to make sure they have every opportunity. That's important, I agreed. Where did you get the capital for these investments? That must require significant funds. Derek cleared his throat. We've been saving aggressively. Making smart choices. Right. Vanessa's smile widened. Actually, I have to thank you, Sarah. Thank me. I stopped by your apartment earlier this week. I used that emergency key Mom and Dad have. I hope you don't mind. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd borrow that book you mentioned. She hadn't mentioned any book. We both knew she was lying. Did you find what you were looking for? I asked quietly. I found your little safe, actually. Behind that boring map in your office. And since you never got around to changing the combination from Mom's birthday, which is frankly terrible security by the way, I took a peek inside. Mom and Dad exchanged confused glances. Vanessa, what are you talking about? Sarah's been hiding cash in a safe. Vanessa laughed. Well, not cash exactly. Some kind of old bonds or certificates. They looked ancient, probably something Grandpa left her. And since Sarah clearly wasn't doing anything with them, just letting them sit there gathering dust, I figured she wouldn't mind if I borrowed them. The room went very quiet. Borrowed them, I repeated. For the college fund. Those papers were just sitting in your safe doing nothing. But Derek's advisor says they can be cashed and reinvested for actual returns. We're helping you really. Otherwise you'd just leave them there forever. She pulled the folders from her purse. She'd actually brought them to dinner like trophies and set them on the table. See? Just some old government bonds or something. The advisor says they're probably worth a few $1,000s. Maybe $10,000 if we're lucky. Still nothing to sneeze at. Derek leaned forward to examine the documents. These do look legitimate. The firm should be able to process them next week. Vanessa. My voice was very calm. Did you break into my home? Don't be dramatic. I used a key. Did you force open my locked office door? She waved a hand dismissively. I learned some things from YouTube. It wasn't that hard. Did you crack my safe security system? There's an app for that. Honestly, Sarah, if you're going to keep valuables, you need better protection. Anyone could have gotten in there. I looked at my parents. Dad was frowning now, starting to realize this might be more serious than Vanessa was making it sound. Mom still looked confused, caught between her two daughters. You committed breaking and entering, I said to Vanessa. You defeated a secured lock, compromised an electronic safe, and stole the contents. Stole. Vanessa laughed. Sarah, we're family. It's not stealing when it's from your sister. Besides, you clearly weren't using them. When was the last time you even looked at those papers? Last month. During my quarterly audit. You're what? I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Those aren't old bonds from Grandpa. Those are bearer bonds issued by the United States Treasury. Current series. Total face value, $500,000. They're registered federal instruments that I'm authorized to hold as part of my position with the Treasury Department. The color drained from Vanessa's face. What are you talking about? I'm a senior financial analyst with the Treasury Department's Securities Fraud Investigation Division. I hold a top-secret security clearance. Those bonds in your purse are protected government securities that I maintain custody of as part of my work investigating international financial crimes. Derek's hand froze on his wine glass. Government securities? Specifically, instruments used to track and identify securities fraud patterns. Each bond is serialized and registered in the federal tracking database. The moment anyone attempts to cash them, transfer them, or even verify them with a financial institution, the system automatically flags the transaction and notifies the Treasury Inspector General's office. You're joking. Vanessa's voice had gone shrill. You're making this up to scare me. I reported the theft 4 hours ago. To my supervisor, to the Inspector General, and to the Secret Service Financial Crimes Task Force. They've been tracking your movements since you left my apartment. The doorbell rang. Everyone at the table jumped except me. I'd been expecting this. That, I said quietly, is the response team. The doorbell rang again, followed by a loud knock and a commanding voice. Treasury Inspector General. We need to speak with Vanessa Morrison. Mom's face went white. Sarah, what is happening? Vanessa committed multiple federal crimes. Now she's going to face the consequences. Dad stood up. I'll get the door. Dad, no. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Don't let them in. Sarah's lying. This is some kind of sick joke. It's not a joke. I looked at her directly. You broke into a secured residence. You defeated anti-tamper measures on a protected safe. You stole $500,000 in United States Treasury instruments. You just told this entire table that you plan to cash those instruments through a financial advisor. That's theft of government property, tampering with federal security measures, and attempted securities fraud. All federal felonies. The knocking grew more insistent. We have a warrant. Open the door now. Derek pushed back from the table, his face ashen. Vanessa, what did you do? I didn't know. Her voice cracked. How was I supposed to know she had government bonds? He works a boring office job. She never tells us anything about what she does. I have top secret clearance, I said. I can't tell you anything about what I do. That's what clearance means. Dad opened the front door. 4 federal agents in tactical gear entered, led by a woman in a Treasury Inspector General jacket. She held up her credentials. I'm Special Agent Lisa Martinez, Treasury Inspector General. We have a warrant for the arrest of Vanessa Morrison and the recovery of stolen federal securities. She looked directly at Vanessa. Ma'am, I need you to stand up and step away from the table. This is insane. Vanessa was crying now. They're just papers. Sarah's my sister. This is a family issue. Ma'am, the instruments you stole are United States Treasury bearer bonds with a combined value of $500,000. They are registered federal securities protected under 18 U.S.C. Section 641. Your theft of these instruments, combined with your stated intent to cash them, constitutes multiple federal violations. Agent Martinez's voice was professional but firm. Stand up, please. Vanessa looked around wildly. At our parents, at Derek, at Uncle Mike. Somebody do something. She's sending me to jail over some stupid bonds. $500,000, Agent Martinez corrected. In protected government securities. Not stupid. Federal property. 2 agents moved forward and pulled Vanessa to her feet. She tried to jerk away, but they were professionals. Vanessa Morrison, you're under arrest for theft of government property, defeating federal security measures, and attempted securities fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Sarah, please. Vanessa's perfect makeup was running now, black mascara streaking down her face. I'm your sister. We grew up together. You can't do this to me. You did this to yourself, I said quietly. You broke into my home. You stole federal property. You just told everyone at this table you were planning to cash those bonds. I didn't make you do any of that. They put handcuffs on her wrists. Derek stood frozen, staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Agent Martinez picked up the folders from the table, examining them briefly. All three are present. Serial numbers match the reported theft. She looked at me. Dr. Chen, we'll need you to come to the field office tomorrow to verify the instruments and provide a formal statement. Of course. What time? 9 a.m. Ask for Agent Martinez. She nodded to her team and they began escorting Vanessa toward the door. My sister was sobbing now, her designer dress rumpled, her perfect hair disheveled. Mom. Dad. Don't let them take me. Please. Our parents stood helpless, watching their golden child being arrested by federal agents in their dining room. Wait. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. How long could she? Agent Martinez paused at the door. Theft of government property carries up to 10 years. Defeating federal security measures adds another 5. Attempted securities fraud is another 20. The U.S. attorney will determine final charges, but your daughter is looking at substantial federal prison time. 35 years? Dad's voice cracked. For taking some bonds from her sister? For stealing $500,000 in protected federal securities, sir. The Treasury Department doesn't negotiate on these charges. They can't. It would compromise national financial security. They took Vanessa out to one of the black SUVs parked in the driveway. Through the window I watched them secure her in the back seat, still crying and protesting. The dining room was silent except for Mom's quiet weeping. Finally, Uncle Mike spoke. Sarah, what exactly do you do for the government? I investigate international securities fraud. Money laundering schemes. Criminal organizations that try to manipulate financial markets. I work with classified information and handle sensitive federal instruments as part of my investigations. And Vanessa just stole $500,000 in Treasury bonds that are actively tracked by federal databases, yes. The moment she walked out of my apartment with them, the system flagged the theft. When she told her financial advisor about them, he would have been legally required to verify them with Treasury. That verification would have triggered an automatic federal investigation even if I hadn't reported it. Derek sank back into his chair. The advisor. Oh God. When he tries to cash them, he'll be questioned as a potential co-conspirator, I confirmed. Treasury will investigate whether he knew they were stolen. If they determine he was involved in any way, he'll face charges too. We didn't know. Derek's voice was hollow. I swear we had no idea she'd stolen them. She told me she'd found some old bonds in your apartment and you'd said she could have them. That's not what happened. She broke into my home, picked my office lock, cracked my safe and stole federal property. The security footage shows everything. Mom looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Security footage? I maintain surveillance systems in my residence. It's required for my clearance level. The footage has been turned over to the Inspector General's office. It shows Vanessa's entire break-in, including the timestamps and her techniques for defeating my locks. You were watching, Mom said slowly. When she broke in, you were watching it happen. I was in Washington, D.C. for a classified briefing. I got the security alert on my phone and pulled up the camera feed. And you just watched her steal from you? You didn't call her? Didn't try to stop her? I called the Treasury Inspector General's office and followed protocol for reporting theft of federal securities. That's what I'm required to do. Dad's hands were shaking. She's your sister, Sarah. Your own sister. How could you let them arrest her? Over money. Over federal crimes, Dad. This isn't about money between siblings. This is about theft of United States government property. If I'd failed to report it, I would have been charged with conspiracy and lost my clearance. My career would be over and I'd probably go to prison alongside her. But surely you could have worked something out, Mom pleaded. Given her a warning. Told her to return them. The bonds were in her possession for 4 hours. In that time she contacted a financial advisor and initiated the process of cashing them. That's attempted securities fraud. There's no working it out with federal charges. The law doesn't care that we're related. Uncle Mike rubbed his face. Jesus Christ. Vanessa always did think the rules didn't apply to her. They don't usually, I said. Because you've all spent our entire lives making excuses for her. Smoothing things over. Fixing her mistakes. But you can't smooth over federal crimes. The Treasury Department doesn't care that she's pretty or charming or that Mom and Dad love her more. That's not fair, Mom said sharply. We don't love her more. Don't you? I looked around the table. When's the last time any of you asked about my work? My life? When's the last time you visited my apartment or expressed any interest in what I do? You've been to Vanessa's house dozens of times. I've been living in Philadelphia for 8 years and you've visited twice. The silence answered for them. Vanessa assumed my work was meaningless because you all assumed my work was meaningless. She thought those bonds were just old papers because none of you ever considered that I might have anything of value. That I might be successful. That my career might actually matter. Sarah. Dad started but I cut him off. I hold a top-secret security clearance. I make $167,000 a year. I've received 3 commendations from the Secretary of the Treasury for my work dismantling international fraud networks. Last year I helped recover $90 million in stolen securities. But none of you know that because you never asked. Derek was staring at me like I was a stranger. Vanessa told me you were probably making 40 or 50,000. She told you that because she assumed it. Because you all assumed it. Because I don't live in a McMansion or drive a Range Rover or brag about my salary at family dinners. Where does your money go? Uncle Mike asked, genuinely curious now. Investments. Retirement accounts. Charitable foundations. I live simply because I prefer it that way, not because I can't afford otherwise. But Vanessa looked at my lifestyle and assumed poverty. She assumed those bonds in my safe were some forgotten inheritance rather than active federal instruments I'm responsible for protecting. Agent Martinez had returned from processing Vanessa into the vehicle. Dr. Chin, one more thing. We found evidence in Mrs. Morrison's phone records that she'd been researching how to open safes for the past 2 weeks. She also made several searches about cashing old bonds and whether family members could claim them. This wasn't an impulsive decision. She planned this. The weight of that settled over the room. 2 weeks, I said softly. She spent 2 weeks planning to rob me. The U.S. attorney will use that to demonstrate premeditation. It strengthens the case significantly. Agent Martinez glanced at Vanessa's husband. Mr. Morrison will need to interview you as well. You're not under arrest, but we need to establish what you knew about your wife's plans. Derek nodded mutely. Agent Martinez left and the room fell silent again. The trial took 9 months to reach court. Vanessa's attorney tried everything. Claiming she thought the bonds belonged to the family, arguing she didn't understand their value, suggesting I'd given her permission to access my apartment. None of it worked. The security footage was damning. It showed her systematically breaking into my home, picking my office lock with tools she'd purchased specifically for that purpose, using a safe-cracking app on her phone and stealing the folders containing the bonds. Her phone records showed the 2 weeks of research. Her text messages to Derek revealed she knew the bonds might be valuable. She'd written found Sarah's secret stash, might be worth serious $, the day she'd stolen them. The financial advisor testified that she'd contacted him about old Treasury bonds, and asked about maximum returns with no questions asked. He'd refused and reported the conversation to his compliance department, which had flagged it with Treasury before Vanessa was even arrested. The federal prosecutor walked the jury through each element of each crime. Theft of government property. The bonds were federal instruments. Vanessa had taken them without authorization. They were worth over $500,000. Defeating federal security measures. She'd researched and purchased lock-picking tools, used an app to crack the safe's electronic security. Attempted securities fraud. She tried to cash the bonds through a financial advisor, knowing they weren't hers. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison and ordered her to pay $500,000 in restitution, plus an additional $150,000 in fines for the security violations. Vanessa sobbed throughout the sentencing. Mom and Dad sat in the gallery looking 10 years older than they had 9 months ago. Derek had filed for divorce 3 months into the trial. The judge addressed Vanessa directly before imposing sentence. You didn't steal from a store or a stranger. You systematically planned and executed a theft from your own sister, targeting her specifically because you believed she was vulnerable and her work was unimportant. You violated her home, her security, and her trust. The fact that the stolen property was federal securities makes this a matter of national security, not just family drama. This court cannot and will not treat theft of government property lightly, regardless of familial relationships. Mom tried to talk to me after the sentencing. I wasn't cruel, but I was clear. She made her choices, Mom. Every single step of the way she chose to do this. She's still your sister. And I'm still the daughter you couldn't be bothered to visit or ask about. I'm still the one whose career you dismissed as unimportant. Vanessa didn't come up with the idea that my work was meaningless on her own. She learned it from you. Mom flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked about my job? When's the last time you expressed pride in anything I've accomplished? You bragged about Vanessa's house, her husband, her kids. What have you ever bragged about regarding me? She had no answer. 3 years after Vanessa's arrest, I was promoted to senior supervisory analyst, overseeing a team of 12 investigators working on international securities cases. My clearance was upgraded to top secret/SCI. The Secretary of the Treasury personally presented me with a Distinguished Service Award for my work on a case that recovered $340 million in fraudulent bonds. My parents didn't attend the ceremony. I didn't invite them. Vanessa will be eligible for parole in 9 years. The restitution judgment isn't going away. She'll be making payments for the rest of her life. Her house was foreclosed. Derek remarried. The kids live with him and barely speak to their mother. Sometimes I wonder if she finally understands what she stole. If she's realized that her boring bureaucrat sister was actually protecting $500,000 in federal securities as part of work that matters on a national scale. But mostly I just focus on my work. The securities markets don't care about family drama. The fraud cases don't need validation from people who can't understand them. The work just matters. And that's enough. My apartment has military-grade security now. Biometric locks, encrypted safes with tamper-evident technology, AI-monitored surveillance systems. The Inspector General's office approved the upgrades and Treasury paid for installation. I never changed the emergency key policy though. My parents still have a key. They've never used it to visit. I'm not bitter about it. I'm just done expecting things from people who fundamentally never valued what I do. Last month, one of my investigations led to the arrest of an international fraud ring that had stolen $2.3 billion in securities from 7 countries. The case made headlines across financial news networks. 3 foreign governments sent official commendations. I thought about sending the news articles to my parents. Then I thought about years of boring office job, and when are you going to do something important with your life? And, Vanessa's doing so well, maybe you should be more like your sister. Instead, I filed the commendations in my office and moved on to the next case. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for their family to recognize their worth. I decided to stop waiting and just keep protecting the financial security of the United States. The bonds don't need my family's approval to matter. Neither do I. Vanessa writes occasionally. Letters from federal prison in West Virginia where she's serving her sentence. They start with apologies and end with requests. Mostly asking if I can talk to the prosecutor about reducing her sentence or help with her restitution payments, or write letters to the parole board. I don't respond. Not out of cruelty. But because some lessons can't be learned if someone keeps rescuing you from the consequences of your choices. She spent our entire lives believing the rules didn't apply to her. That her charm and beauty and status as the favorite daughter meant she could take what she wanted without consequences. Federal prison is teaching her otherwise. And I'm teaching myself that my worth isn't determined by whether my family recognizes it. The work is enough. The cases I solve, the frauds I prevent, the securities one protect. That's enough. Some people are born into families that celebrate their success. Others have to build their validation from classified briefing to classified briefing, from commendation to commendation, until the work speaks for itself so loudly that even the doubters can't pretend not to see it. I built mine. And no one, not even family, can steal that away. Not anymore.